glad we're here.
It's great to be here.
So, two very unique companies, American Express, a leading credit card company, 164 years old.
Yep.
And then there's David Karp, head of Tumblr, 7 years old.
7.5
7
years
and a half,
old,
all
yeah.
right, let's get that straight. But you both have been able to find a way to collaborate. John, tell us about that.
Sure. You know, the relationship has been one that's been built over time. I mean, while we're 164 years old, the only reason we're in business today is because reinvention is something we believe in, and it has to happen again and again. And so our work with Tumblr really is about engaging customers and prospects where they want to be. And that's an important part of our marketing effort.
And so much focus has been on Yahoo and the Alibaba IPO. Now that it's over, do you think you're going to get a more critical eye for investors to see how Tumblr is going to add value to Yahoo?
I hope so. I hope we get a lot more attention and a lot more appreciation for the work that we're doing. We've been hard at work the last year and a half since the acquisition, and working really hard the last almost 8 years on this mission to empower creators.
A lot of promise that you were going to transform Yahoo back into a products company, but we haven't seen that.
I think Marissa's doing that. I hope that we're playing some part in that, but Marissa's doing that.
When do you think we'll see Tumblr play a bigger role in Yahoo's growth strategy?
Hopefully you're starting to. So you're seeing our user base, audience, and creative community grow hugely in the last couple years since the acquisition. A lot of that is a credit to their investment and their support. Their direct investment in actually building on top of our platform, building content like Yahoo magazines, building more and more of their, building more of Yahoo on top of Tumblr. Beyond that, the growth that we've seen in the creative community and the audience is the business, which, look, we were building out from scratch. We started, we got launched 2.5 years ago now. Got to Yahoo, spent those first few months figuring out what technology we were plugging in first. 6 months in, January of this year, launched all of Tumblr's native advertising, Tumblr sponsored posts, on top of Yahoo's ad platform. I mean, that was a huge, huge boon to our business, and huge technology that we would have had to build out from scratch would have taken us certainly a couple more years.
Let's also talk about brand relevance. Tumblr is known for being a young, hip, cool company. How do you maintain that brand when working for a big tech company like Yahoo?
So I think it's something that you need to, I think in the beginning we needed to prove to our users, prove to that community that we hadn't kind of compromised our values, that we hadn't given anything up, that we hadn't moved on, that the team was still as invested and engaged in this thing as we've ever been, and that these were really great partners. And we did that in, it's shown up in all sorts of ways. It showed up in our letter to our community that ended in "fuck yeah," just that little bit of irreverence that hopefully showed everyone that we weren't going corporate all at once. It's hopefully been proven in the products that we've continued to ship and in all of our communication and all those relationships that we have with all those creators and folks in our community. I don't think it's one thing. I don't think it's one thing that we can say. I think it's constantly demonstrated by how we continue to build this thing and how we continue to work with the folks that use Tumblr.
And then John, you would say at American Express, you probably have the opposite problem or challenge, to stay young and relevant. How is American Express trying to do that?
Well, I mean, first of all, we think the difference between young and old is to be young is to embrace and believe that the future will be better than the past, and to be old is to think the past was better than the future. So as we think about the relevance of a brand, it really comes from integrity and the willingness to change. And for us, I mean, when we think about integrity, it's not just the integrity of American Express. When we're working with Tumblr, it's about the integrity of Tumblr as well. So the work we put on Tumblr has to be up to the standards that have been established by that platform. It's the only way we're going to be accepted. And so when I think about how American Express, a 164-year-old company, exists today and why is it relevant, it's because the integrity has always been there. It's always been about service, but it's always been willing to change.
And is targeting the millennial generation, is that a big part of your growth strategy at American Express? And if so, how are you doing that?
Well, if you're a 164-year-old company, you have to have a history of targeting the next generation, or otherwise you wouldn't be here, right? I mean, people say to me, what are you going to do? I mean, millennials are going to transact without a card. Isn't that frightening? Well, American Express was 108 years old when we launched the first American Express card. We did it for 108 years without a card. I think we'll do it again. So our view isn't so much that, it's a challenge, it's that constant change. Millennials are very important to us, and in fact, we're finding that we have a big business with millennials already.
Is your customer base changing at all ever since joining Yahoo, or are you still attracting and marketing to the same customers?
Look, it's always changing as it's always growing. Markets that we had barely any presence in a couple years ago have become a big part of the network. Markets like Brazil, which showed up almost all at once. It felt like we had hundreds of millions of people show up in like a 9-month window there a couple years ago. It's always changing. The demographics have always been incredibly diverse, and that's something that we really cherish in the network. I think that the thing that's top of mind for us is how do we make sure we don't compromise that as we try and move the platform forward for brands, for mediums like video. How do we make sure that we don't leave this incredibly diverse global community of creators behind, or leave part of it behind? And you do that by making sure that they're all part of your world, that they're all top of mind.
You just mentioned video, David, and Tumblr there's been a lot of talk about Tumblr investing and strengthening its video platform. Can you talk to us about that, and how is that going to be seen as a competitive threat to the YouTubes of the world?
I definitely don't think it's competitive. I mean, look, we've had fantastic integration with Vimeo and YouTube to date. Those were integrations we did very, very early on because we wanted video to be a big part of the network. And what video tools are creators using? They use YouTube and Vimeo, and we wanted to make sure that that stuff would look great on Tumblr. This time around, we did even deeper integrations with Vine and Instagram, 2 new emerging video platforms, and have done a whole lot to innovate on the consumption experience of video on Tumblr and the creation experience of video on Tumblr. YouTube, Instagram, all of these platforms are going to be a huge part of the creative ecosystem, a huge part of the video ecosystem. We want to make sure that we support all of it. That Tumblr is an incredible place to enjoy video, to share your YouTube videos or share your Vine videos, or to create video. And I think in the last year we've done a lot more to move forward on that.
Video,
Can I add to that?
Yes.
Because it was one of the other things from where I sit that Tumblr has done is it's brought so much both creativity and storytelling to the web. And that was always such an important thing. I mean, historically, the storytelling aspect was always the greatest challenge. And now, I mean, video is one of the greatest storytelling media. And so it's where we think there's enormous opportunity, because telling your story, engaging people in your story is what it's about. And Tumblr has done that. Video is just another extension of the storytelling capabilities of this platform.
How did you two meet?
You want to tell that story? It was a pretty serious phone call from my vantage point.
Go ahead.
So John was on the board of Yahoo at the time of the acquisition, so I got to jump on the phone with John and the rest of the board for the pleasure of getting grilled for about 15 minutes after many hours of conversation between me and Marissa and her team and Marissa's team and the board. And I got the last lightning round of, okay, but what about this and what about this? And is this guy actually saying before, presumably you guys were okay with it, I hope. And we went into business together. Yeah.
David was very compelling. Let me first there. But what David had built was even more compelling. And that really is what created that level of interest and commitment, both from Marissa and the board. But beyond that, the other thing that was happening at the same time was that David's teams and my team were working together in building opportunity. And the way we got there, because people say to me, how do you guys work with new players? How do you guys get involved? What we started really was with experiments. We had a lot of experiments. We were trying, can we tell this story? How is this going to be received? Will that work? And so it really has been a relationship based on experiments that have succeeded and failed, and then replicating the ones that have succeeded. And that really is where we are today.
And how does this partnership between American Express and Tumblr move forward from here?
So, look, our mission in this is just stretching the canvas, right? It's making Tumblr a more empowering, capable platform for this army of independent creators out there in the world, and these incredibly resourceful brands and creative advertisers and marketers who are trying to tell their story, who are trying to attract new customers who don't know the American Express promise yet, who don't aspire to have that card in their pocket, or to work with these guys, or to drive the car, or to drink the soda. That's our bread and butter, is stretching that canvas and harnessing the bleeding edge technology to do that. Then it's up to folks like John, and again, these millions of indie creators out there in the world, to show up and actually show us what's possible with those tools. So we're holed up in New York, taking the tech, trying to turn it into the most powerful creative platform in the world. John and his team also in New York, working with a whole host of talented creators, using those tools to tell their story.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is the number of what we would call influencers who are on Tumblr is really powerful. We've been working with groups of bloggers and whatnot to really get our message out to new audiences that may not think American Express is either interested in them or focused on them or will serve them well. And by really aligning with both the platform and these key influencers, we have found the impact to be tremendous.
Okay. I also want to ask you, David, being an entrepreneur, selling your company to Yahoo for over $1 billion, there's so many entrepreneurs here in the audience. What advice would you give them if they're looking to sell their company to one of the big tech titans out there?
Advice on selling your company, that's, man. Look, I think the reason that's an impossible question to answer, there are very different circumstances, different relationships that people have with these things that they're building. I think the thing that I was able to step back and see after 7 years of working on this thing was that the sort of corporate environment was always in flux. Board members are coming on and going. Markets are doing whatever they're doing. You can IPO, you can get acquired. There are all sorts of novel new ways to stay private for longer. There are a lot of manifestations of the company. The guiding light for me, the thing that I was always in it for, was the stuff that we were building in this community that we were serving. And I found that as much as everything else was always kind of in flux, kind of changing, kind of evolving, as long as I and our team stayed focused on that true north, on this community and all of these tools that we were proud to put out there into the world, we were having fun. We were doing work that we were proud of, and we were creating something valuable. And when we were raising money 1.5 years ago, and one of those conversations turned into an acquisition conversation, and all of a sudden we're trying to imagine life as a wholly owned subsidiary of another company, specifically a wholly owned subsidiary of Yahoo, working for Marissa and her team. Just tried to imagine whether or not we would still be able to focus on that true north, focus on building tools that we were proud of for this community that we love. And we had a lot of questions for Marissa and her team, but after working through those questions, it was clear like we were going to get to do that. So I think at the end of the day, it comes down to what do you want to be doing here, and will this place support that? And the truth is, like, you're always beholden to someone. There's always the worry that the public markets or your board or your boss are going to like rip you to shreds if you blow it. But they should, and you should be pushing yourself even harder. And with that in mind, it was pretty easy to come to grips with what life would be like as part of a bigger company.
Are there those tough talks with Marissa Mayer ever?
are there those tough talks? She's been an incredible supporter. You know, I think we've made a lot of progress that first year and a half, and should be continuing to make a whole lot of progress going forward. So, you know, hopefully that continues to be the great supportive relationship that it's been. But, you know, we've got a lot to prove and a whole lot to do.
The only thing I would add, and it really is building on what David has said, having been on the other side, it's really about businesses with a purpose. And, you know, the only advice I would give, because it matters to Amex after 164 years, we still talk about what is our purpose. Are we living up to it? Do we deliver on it? I get, based on the conversations David and I have had, that is very much resident at Tumblr and not being compromised. So I would argue that this idea that you've got to be in business with a purpose, and that purpose has to be clear, and it's not just about the money or the profitability or the revenue. Those things have to come, but the purpose is really where the focus needs to be.
That's a great point. You are on the other side. So John, when you're evaluating entrepreneurs or companies that you want to potentially partner with at American Express, what are the top 3 things you look for in an entrepreneur?
Well, the first is, what is your purpose, right? And what are you bringing to market? How well do you understand the market? The second is, what are you going to be like to work with? You know, can you make a difference for our business, but what are you going to be like to work with? Will you experiment with us? Will you allow us to experiment? You know, I get solicited all the time by lots of people, and many of them are very rigid and don't want to give us the ability to say, how can we work our way into this relationship? And so I think that's the second. And the third is recognizing what we have to deliver on, and that is a service experience for our customers and prospects. And if you can help us understand how you can really help us with that, it makes all the difference.
Wonderful. Gentlemen, we're going to leave it there. David Karp, John Hayes, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.